I just recorded my video about my single action army, so I figured I'd record a video about another classic handgun. The Pistolet Makarov was a single stack, double action, single action handgun. Steel frame, one piece Bakelite grip, and it chambered the 9x18 millimeter Makarov cartridge that was roughly similar in power to the American 38 Special, slightly more so than the 380 ACP, or as the Europeans call it, 9mm quartz. Significantly less powerful, however, than the 9mm Luger or Parabellum or NATO or whatever you want to call it. In the closing years of the Soviet Union, right at 1990, which the Soviet Union fell in 91, they introduced the PMM. The PMM utilized much of the same componentry of the Makarov, of their regular Makarov. The slides are 100% interchangeable. The barrels are the same. I think some of the fire control components may be the same as well. The main thing was they made a wider frame to accommodate a double stack magazine. Where did my single stack? Instead of the single stack. Interestingly, since they had so many of the regular PMs around, when they introduced the PMM, they made it so that you can use the existing single stack magazines like that. They will lock open on an empty magazine, they'll feed, they'll function fine. They don't work quite as well as the double stacks. You know, they wobble around a little bit, and as you saw there, they can get hung up when you're inserting them, but they work. The double stack, of course, will absolutely not work in the PM. The PMM fired a more powerful cartridge, a high impulse version of the 9x18. So they cut spiral flutes in the chamber of the barrel to try to delay opening. You know, these are just straight blowback pistols. They tried to create something of a delayed blowback by cutting the spiral flutings in. This is a system you'll see in some other handguns as well, and of course most famously in the HK roller delayed series of rifles. It improved durability, but probably not quite enough. I'm not sure how much that high impulse ammunition was actually issued or used, but it worked fine with regular 9x18 as well. The PMMs never fully displaced. I don't think they ever came close to displacing the PMs. Having been to Russia 4 times already, you see these guys all over the place. I have never seen a PMM in person. To this day, last time I was in Russia was December of 23. You see cops on the street, they've got PMs. These were used to some extent, I think, in Chechnya. I think they were already known to be sort of just a stopgap, if nothing else. They've since developed the PEA, which I believe is the current service handgun of the Russian military. Though law enforcement, as I mentioned, still uses the PM. There is, however, a picture of President, if you want to call him President, Vladimir Putin shooting a PMM. Clearly, he's not much of a gun guy, I would say. At least from appearances, he looks a little bit cringy shooting it, but I'll provide a couple of those pictures here. And I'm back. The American importation of the Russian Makarovs in the 90s. Let me backtrack. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Makarovs were pretty widespread in America, largely military surplus. They came from Bulgaria, chiefly. A few from the Soviet Union, though not that many. East Germany. A lot of the other Warsaw Pact countries that didn't make Makarovs but just used them exported theirs to us over the years. And I say in the 90s, but this is beginning in the 90s on up through really the current era just about. You still see batches of Makarovs coming in as of 2024. Excuse me, my air conditioning just kicked on. I think I need to have it checked out. But anyway, beside the point. You also saw commercial model Bulgarian Makarovs, which were nearly identical to the military models, and commercial Russian guns. Now, I'm not 100% sure how the Bulgarians managed to import theirs in the past without trying to do more to. Gun Control Act of 1968 is meant to limit the importation of cheap European handguns into the American market. You've got to incorporate enough sporting features onto the pistol to add up a certain number of points so you can import it. That can be target grips, that can be adjustable sights, whatever. The Bulgarian pistols were pretty much, I think they just used target grips, which was a very simple and easy thing. You just take the grip off and you put on the military surplus pistol and bam, there you go. Well, the Russians went with an adjustable sight. It was sort of a copy of, I guess it was a Bomar adjustable sight, which was pretty popular back in the day. It's actually not a bad sight in retrospect, but everyone hated them back then. Spoiler alert, I changed mine to a fixed sight, which I kind of regret doing. But they used adjustable sights, and that was it. They were usually marked by call, though this one is not marked by call. Whereas Americans oftentimes mispronounce the word Baikal. B-A-I-K-A-L. Name taken from Lake Baikal, which is one of the prides of Russia. Deepest lake in the world. Allegedly the most clean water as well. Baikal was an export name for all sorts of products manufactured at IJ-70. It's a fairly old name. They began using it in the 60s. I don't think they use it anymore. In fact, I'm fairly certain they don't. I think they dropped that name in late 90s, early 2000s. But Baikal was not the manufacturer. The manufacturer is IJ-70 Mechanics. I may have missed the middle word. I may have butchered the middle word. I speak a little Russian, but I don't speak it very well. But it's IJ-70 Mechanical Factory. It's a huge industrial enterprise in IJ-70, Russia. Most famously in the West, at least, they produce firearms and other weaponry, but they also have produced motorcycles and cars, car parts, some consumer products as well, all sorts of things. It was just a tremendous Soviet-style factory city. And So IZh-70 or IMEZ, depending on which variant you want to call it, is the actual producer. Nowadays, it's known as Kalashnikov Kontsern. But IZh-70, they sold them here under the Baikal name. They were usually imported either as the IJ-70 or the IZh-70. In Russian, it should be IJ. Russian doesn't have the letter J at all. They have the letter Zh. And IJ, of course, is short for IZhevsk or IZh-70. They were imported in both 380 ACP and the original 9mm Makarov. 9mm Makarov was viewed as more preferable because it was a little bit more powerful, and at least before Russia became sanctioned out the yin-yang, it was actually cheaper to shoot 9x18 than it was 380. Nowadays, the situations have unfortunately flipped. But mine is a 380 ACP high-capacity Makarov, IJ-70 17AH. I'll break down the model name for you. The A stands for adjustable sights. All the IJ-70s sold in America are A variants. And the H indicates high-capacity magazine. And the 17 indicates that it was 9x17. That is to say, 380 ACP. If it had been a 9x18, it would be IJ-70 18AH. There were also stainless models. They were two-tone models. They actually had a fairly wide variety of configurations you could order. And they were quite cheap back in those days. In 1996, Bill Clinton signed a voluntary trade limitation with then-President Boris Yeltsin to prohibit the importation of so-called military weapons from Russia. Yeltsin was worried that cash-strapped soldiers would steal weaponry out of the government arsenals and sell them to Americans. And Clinton, of course, hated all guns, so any excuse he could come up with to ban their import, he took. So, while the IZh-70 was never a military weapon, and it was actually readily discernible from military Makarovs, somehow or other, that got swept up in the ban, and importation of the IZh-70 stopped. Sadly. The IZh-70, it should be said, if I'm not already mentioned, I started filming this video earlier and had to stop to babysit my daughters. But if I haven't said so already, the IZh-70 was a lower quality pistol than the Soviet variant. This is due to a number of factors. Quality control standards dropped once Russia became capitalist. Everyone was cash strapped, and they suddenly found themselves having to sell their goods on an open international market, and they were forced to try to undercut everyone else's prices as best they could. This is also due to simply the machinery being getting worn out and becoming in a poor state of repair. So the IZh-70s were something of a low point in Makarov production. Still fine for the most part. I wouldn't say they're less safe or less reliable necessarily than the Soviet era models or Bulgarians or whatever, but they're definitely a little bit rougher. I've had a couple of IZh-70s. I've had this one and also a single stack as well. But I would definitely say my single stack Makarov was a decided step below this Bulgarian military model. But this one's okay. The trigger is a little bit odd. But my IZh-70 I purchased from a pawn shop in Dawsonville, Georgia for $160. 400 jewelry and bone it was. It used to actually be located on Georgia 400. But they used to have just fantastic deals and selection. You know, they still exist, they've moved, but it doesn't seem to have many, if any, of the original staff. And while their selection is still good, I'd say overall I like the store less now than I did back in those days. Back in those days, you know, I'm sort of friends with some of the people that work there, and go there probably once a week at least. But I was able to pick this up for $160, which nowadays these tend to go for $500, $600, maybe even $700 on GunBroker. $160 was a good deal even back then. But I've shot it some. I haven't put a whole lot of rounds through it. It's not a particularly enjoyable pistol to shoot. The trigger, like I said, is kind of, you get a little bit of sort of trigger slap, for lack of a better word. It's kind of hitchy and stagey. Even on this military Makarov, all pistols have been safety checked. It's not a fantastic trigger. But, this one, single action is a little bit creepier, and there's just something kind of staple gun-like about the double action. The trigger doesn't reset very well somehow. I don't know how to describe it. Like, you hold the trigger back and try to ride the reset, and you can feel a reset. But no, you can't actually. Sometimes it won't actually like discharge unless you take your finger fully off the trigger and pull it again. Poorly fitted parts is all I can come up with. But overall, this Bulgarian model is much smoother operating than IJ-70. You know, kind of an interesting piece. This is actually, while I've owned several guns from the Russian Federation, this is my only, the only one I have left. I have you know, Soviet Mosin Nagant, but this is my only handgun made in the modern era of Russian. But has a sort of a Parkerized frame and a blued slide. I'll also show you some of the markings. The serial prefix here says BOH. That's actually in Cyrillic VON. That mark says it looks like a P and the letter C and T. That's actually RST in Russian. It stands for it's for the Rosstandart acceptance mark. That's an quality assurance that all products sold in the Russian Federation must have. So this indicates that the pistol would have been acceptable for use on the territory of the Russian Federation. The arrow in the circle there is the arsenal mark for Izhevsk. I'm not 100% sure what that letter in the circle is. That's actually a Russian letter P. I think it stands something for powder, perhaps like it's good for smokeless powder, but I'm not really sure. There you have IJ-70 AH, made in Russia by IMEZ. And on the inverse side, caliber 380 ACP B West, Tucson, Arizona. B West was the importer. These are actually imported by a number of different importers, but mine happened to have been B West. I think my other IJ-70 was imported by PW Arms, if I'm not mistaken. And this Makarov was also imported by PW Arms. Now, I'll show you the grip. You know, Whereas the grip on the military model is fairly simple. The grip on the high capacity had checkering on both the back strap and both panels, as well as on the front strap. Interestingly, that's kind of a cool touch. I believe in fact I know the frames are actually investment cast at this point, instead of being forged like on the older ones. The Soviet Union and later the Russian Federation had been moving more and more towards investment casting over forging and milling for a number of years. So while the Bulgarians remained forged and milled, the Russians had numerous parts like the safety, and hammer and things like that were actually investment casts. But there was no decrease in the strength or longevity of the parts. It was just a more inexpensive way and more efficient way of producing things, not having to worry with all the waste associated with milling. But just assemble it real quick. There you go. As you can see, simple straight blowback. The barrel is fixed to the frame. Recoil spring goes over the barrel. Slide, not a whole lot to it. In fact, these pistols, both the single and double stack, are extremely simple. I'm not aware of any repeating handgun that is more simple. These are much simpler than revolvers. These are simpler even than Glocks. I had for a while a Polish P64, which was Poland's pistol in 9x18 Makarov, and I did a complete teardown on that pistol, and good heavens, was that a complicated nightmare to put back together. These, the Polish pistol had like 80 parts probably. This has 26, I believe, including my grip screws and things like that. Really a rather remarkable handgun. People sometimes oftentimes say that Makarov is nothing but a knockoff of the Walther PP or PPK. They're significantly more economical in their let me rephrase that. They're a lot more elegant in design, I would say, than the Walther. The Walther is hideously complex for what it does, and that complexity does not improve anything. Walthers, I would absolutely say, are in no way superior to the Makarov. Probably inferior in most ways. And it just so happens the Makarov is also a lot simpler. The Walthers, when Walther introduced the PP and PPK, they were meant primarily for high-ranking military officers. When Nikolai Makarov introduced the Makarov pistol, it was meant for standard issue with the Soviet Armed Forces. So this was absolutely a frontline handgun, and it was refined over the years. So it's an extraordinarily reliable and durable piece. Quite simple. I can even show you how the slides change. Would you like to see what a PMM looks like? Well, it would look something like this. Just ordinary fixed sights. Functions flawlessly. These are from two entirely different countries, from two different eras of manufacturing. This one was made in '79. This one was probably made, just 94, 95 time frame. But they interchange and function just pretty impressive, in my opinion. The magazines. A single stack magazine is about as simple as you can have a magazine. There's just I believe it's extruded if I'm not mistaken, but there's just this tube. It's got a generous sight hole in the side. Got a simple follower with a little tab to assist loading, and a base plate and a spring. That's it. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Single stack, so there's no advanced geometry or anything. It's just you know, it works. When they went to the double stack magazine, things became a little bit more complicated and a little bit more creative, I would say. You know, normally when someone creates a double stack magazine, they if they're creating it from the ground up for a new handgun. So they'll make the taper into the one position up here near the top. Since this was meant to actually interchange in a handgun that was already designed to be single stack, it tapers into one a lot earlier than most double stack magazines, and that required a little bit of ingenuity on their part. You know, the top 2 or 3 rounds are actually in single file, whereas it spreads out into double stack down below. So what they did is they actually gave it not 1 but 2 followers. This is the top one. Sits up in the feed lips like this, and this nests inside this other one. And so as it's being pushed down, you know, it's just a dual stage, not recoil spring, but magazine spring and follower setup. I mean, you've got this little plate at the bottom that locks in. I have 3 or 4 different double stack magazines, which is a little bit of a flex, I guess, to admit that, because they have always been rare and somewhat expensive on the American market. There weren't an awful lot of them imported. You know, they didn't really import many extras when they imported these pistols, and these pistols weren't imported for very long. So right after I got this one, I was able to find one online on Guns America, I believe, which I ordered. And then years later, I ordered an additional 2 or 3 straight from Moscow. I found a guy in Moscow who had a little website where he would sell Makarov accessories and export them to the U.S. So that's how I got the rest. And his prices were pretty good. I think I actually paid less. I think I actually paid less for the ones from Moscow in the early 2010s than I did from the one I bought, you know, back in 2008 or so, domestically in America. But unfortunately, of course, that you're not importing anything from Moscow anymore. But all my magazines, each one is a little bit different from the other because they had different variations and things. You know, one of them, this one actually has a metal follower, aluminum, I believe. Most of them were this sort of undyed plastic. I think the metal was probably a lot higher quality, but interestingly, the little locking tab at the base on this one is that same plastic. So I can only find 3 of them today. I'm not sure what happened to the other one, but I'm glad to have them. I consider the magazine actually to be more interesting than the pistol because this is just a very unique setup. First time I ever saw the SIG, what is it, P365, whatever their little micro compact concealed carry pistol with a stack and a half magazine. First thing I thought of was these. I was like, you know, I don't have a SIG P365 and I haven't really looked at them in a while, so I may be wrong, but first thing, this was the immediate thing that came to mind. And that wouldn't be the first time. When Surefire introduced the quad stack AR-15 magazine, 60 round quad stack AR-15 magazine back, you know, 2012 or whatever that was. First thing I thought of then was the Russian RPK-74 quad stack magazine that they had been playing around with in the late 90s. Folks don't necessarily give the Russians enough credit for their inventiveness, particularly when it comes to firearms. They do have some out-of-the-box thinking, and they come up with some interesting ideas. Oftentimes the big problem is they don't refine them quite as well as they could. But that's about all. Hope you have a good day.